The wooden doors of the county courthouse creaked open as little Elijah clutched his mother's trembling hand. He was only 8 years old, but his wide, determined eyes carried a weight far beyond his years. His mother, Keisha, stood nervously, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. She was being dragged into court over a false accusation made by their landlord, who claimed she had broken her lease and owed thousands. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a stern expression, tapped his gavel. Case number 4537, Keisha Brown versus Martin Realty, he announced. The courtroom was filled with murmurs, neighbors, lawyers, and reporters who had caught wind of the unusual case. Keisha's attorney had withdrawn just days before, leaving her defenseless. Everyone expected her to crumble under the pressure, but Elijah refused to let his mother stand alone. He had spent nights reading law books from the library, carefully underlining passages, asking questions no one thought an 8-year-old could understand. "Your Honor," Elijah said in a clear voice as he stepped forward, surprising everyone, "I'll be representing my mom today." Gasps echoed across the room. The landlord's lawyer smirked, whispering, "This'll be over in 5 minutes." But the judge leaned back, intrigued. "Son, do you even know what that means?" the judge asked, curious rather than dismissive. "Yes, sir," Elijah replied confidently. "The law says every person deserves a fair defense, and my mom deserves hers, even if I'm the only one willing to give it." The courtroom fell silent. The judge studied him, then slowly nodded. "Very well. The court will allow it. For now." Keisha's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son. For the first time that morning, hope flickered in her heart. The courtroom buzzed after Elijah's bold declaration. Some people chuckled, shaking their heads. An 8-year-old defending his mother? It sounded like a joke. The landlord's lawyer, Mr. Davis, leaned smugly against his table. His expensive suit gleamed under the lights as he whispered to his client, "This will be the easiest win of my career." Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable. "Young man," he said, "you may proceed. But understand, this is a court of law. If you wish to represent your mother, you'll need to prove you're serious." "I am, Your Honor," Elijah said firmly. His small hands clutched a stack of papers he had neatly arranged in a folder. He had handwritten notes in pencil, legal terms spelled phonetically, and citations he had copied carefully from library books. Mr. Davis chuckled aloud. "This is absurd. Are we really entertaining this circus act? He can barely reach the table, let alone understand property law." The courtroom erupted in scattered laughter, but Elijah didn't flinch. He turned his big brown eyes toward the landlord's lawyer and spoke with surprising calm. "Mocking me won't change the truth. My mom always paid her rent, and I can prove it." The laughter died down. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, curiosity overcoming his skepticism. Keisha covered her mouth, overwhelmed by her son's courage. "Proceed then," Judge Thompson said, tapping his gavel lightly. Elijah opened his folder and placed a paper on the stand. "This is a receipt from March, signed by Mr. Martin himself," he said, pointing at the signature. "If my mom didn't pay, why would he sign this?" Gasps filled the courtroom again. Mr. Davis's smirk faltered for the first time. Mr. Davis quickly rose from his chair, his voice booming through the courtroom. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. An 8-year-old cannot submit evidence without proper verification. This so-called receipt could be fabricated." Elijah straightened his back, refusing to be intimidated. "Your Honor," he said politely, "may I respond?" Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead, son." Elijah held the receipt carefully between his fingers. "This paper is real. You can see the ink is faded from age, and the handwriting matches the landlord's own signature on the lease agreement." He turned toward Mr. Davis. "If you think it's fake, then I invite you to bring a handwriting expert. Until then, the receipt stands." The courtroom stirred with murmurs. Keisha looked at her son in awe, whispering under her breath, "Where did you learn to talk like that?" Mr. Davis, flustered, slammed his briefcase shut. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. We are wasting time." But Judge Thompson wasn't so quick to dismiss. He tapped his gavel gently. "Mr. Davis, I see no reason to exclude the evidence at this stage. The receipt will be admitted. And I must say young Elijah makes a fair point." The spectators in the gallery began whispering excitedly. Some even smiled, clearly rooting for the The judge motioned for the landlord, Mr. Martin, to take the witness stand. He walked stiffly, his face red with irritation. Clearly he hadn't expected a child to slow down his plan. Mr. Davis adjusted his tie and began, "Mr. Martin, can you confirm that Mrs. Brown failed to pay rent for 3 months?" "Yes, that's correct," Martin replied confidently. Elijah immediately raised his hand. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine?" The courtroom buzzed again. Judge Thompson hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed." Elijah stood on his tiptoes to see over the podium. "Mr. Martin," he began, "do you remember signing this receipt in March?" He held up the paper again. Martin shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall. But isn't that your handwriting?" Elijah pressed. Martin's eyes flickered nervously. "It looks similar, but—" "So, you're saying it could be yours?" Elijah asked quickly, not giving him room to escape. Mr. Davis jumped in. "Objection! He's badgering the witness." But Judge Thompson raised a hand. Overruled. "The boy's question is reasonable. Please answer." Martin's face turned redder. "Fine. Yes, it might be mine." Elijah nodded. "Thank you. Now, if you admitted it might be your signature, how could my mom have missed paying rent?" The courtroom gasped. Even the judge's eyes widened at the logic. Martin stammered, "Well, I must have been mistaken." Elijah stepped back, his voice calm but powerful. "Or maybe you weren't mistaken, sir. Maybe you wanted us gone, so you made up a story." The silence was deafening. Keisha covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her little boy had just cornered a grown man in court. Judge Thompson leaned forward, clearly impressed. "This case is getting very interesting." Mr. Davis stood abruptly, his face flushed. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We cannot let a child manipulate the courtroom with theatrics. My client has been a respected landlord for 20 years. Elijah calmly looked at him. "Respect doesn't mean you're honest." The words, spoken so boldly from such a young voice, sent ripples through the gallery. Judge Thompson raised a brow. "Mr. Davis, I suggest you let the boy finish. He has presented more coherent arguments than some trained attorneys I've seen." Davis's jaw clenched. "Very well," he muttered, sinking back into his chair. Elijah shuffled through his folder and pulled out another document. "Your Honor, this is the lease agreement signed by my mom and Mr. Martin. It says the landlord must provide receipts for every payment. My mom kept all of them. Here they are, April, May, June." He lined them up neatly, one after another, in front of the judge. Gasps echoed across the room again. The evidence was undeniable. Martin's face twisted in anger. "That proves nothing. Maybe she forged them." Elijah lifted his chin. "If my mom forged them, why do the signatures match the checks she gave you? We have copies from the bank." The judge leaned forward, clearly impressed. "Do you have those copies with you?" "Yes, sir," Elijah replied, sliding the papers across. Keisha stared at her son, stunned. She hadn't realized he had gathered so much proof. Elijah had quietly built a case stronger than any lawyer she could have afforded. Judge Thompson studied the papers, then looked directly at the landlord. "Mr. Martin, this evidence raises serious questions about your honesty. You may want to choose your next words carefully." For the first time, Martin looked nervous. The tension in the courtroom grew thicker with every passing second. Elijah stood tall, though his head barely reached the top of the podium. His small hands gripped the edge, his eyes steady on the judge. Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses, clearly weighing the evidence before him. "Mr. Martin," he said slowly, "these receipts and bank statements align. If this is true, then your claim of non-payment is not only weak, it may be fraudulent." Whispers erupted across the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Elijah took a step closer. "Your Honor, my mom didn't deserve to be dragged here. She works hard, pays her bills, and takes care of me. Mr. Martin just wants more money, and he thought we couldn't fight back." The judge leaned back in his chair, impressed by the boy's composure. "Young man, you have an extraordinary grasp of fairness. And Mr. Martin," his tone hardened, "if you're lying, there will be consequences." Martin fidgeted in his seat, his earlier confidence gone. Mr. Davis whispered furiously in his ear, but the landlord looked pale. Keisha squeezed Elijah's shoulder, tears glistening in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt like justice might actually be on her side. The judge's warning rattled Mr. Martin more than he wanted to admit. His forehead glistened with sweat as he shifted in the witness chair. The once confident landlord now looked like a cornered animal. Elijah noticed and pressed forward. "Mr. Martin, do you remember the conversation you had with my mom in June? You told her if she didn't move out, you'd find a way to make her leave." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Martin's eyes widened. "That's nonsense. I never said that." Keisha stood suddenly, her voice shaking. "Yes, you did. Right in front of my son." Elijah lifted another paper. "Your Honor, I wrote it down the same day it happened. My mom signed it too. It's not just my word. It's a record." Judge Thompson took the paper and studied it, his face stern. "Mr. Martin, this looks like intimidation." Mr. Davis jumped up again, shouting, "Objection, this is hearsay." But the judge cut him off sharply. "Quiet, Mr. Davis. I'll decide what is admissible." The landlord slumped lower in his seat, his arrogance unraveling. Meanwhile, Elijah remained steady, his voice calm but firm. "We just want the truth to matter. That's all." The courtroom spectators leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the unexpected turn. An 8-year-old boy was dismantling a grown man's lies, piece by piece. Reporters whispered excitedly, already planning headlines. Judge Thompson looked over his glasses at Mr. Martin. "You're being accused of harassment and false claims. Do you deny this?" Martin's voice cracked. I just wanted her out. The rent was too low. I could earn double with new tenants." The admission sent shockwaves through the room. Keisha covered her mouth in disbelief. Elijah tightened his fists but stayed composed. "So it wasn't about missed payments. It was greed," he said, his voice clear. The gallery erupted in murmurs. A woman whispered, "That little boy just exposed the whole truth." Judge Thompson banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" The noise died down, but the energy remained charged. Mr. Davis rubbed his temples, frustrated beyond words. His carefully constructed case had crumbled in minutes, undone not by a lawyer, but by a child who refused to let his mother be silenced. Elijah looked at his mom with a small, reassuring smile. "It's not over yet, Mom, but we're winning." Keisha squeezed his hand tightly. "Because of you, baby." The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence after Mr. Martin's confession. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his gavel resting in his hand. His eyes, however, were fixed on Elijah. "Young man," the judge said, his voice carrying both authority and admiration, "you've conducted yourself with a level of discipline and clarity that many trained attorneys fail to show. How did you learn all this?" Elijah stood tall, though his voice was soft. "From books, Your Honor. I wanted to protect my mom. She's always protected me, so I had to do the same for her." The judge's stern expression softened. "Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable." Gasps and murmurs filled the room again. A reporter whispered loudly, "This boy could be the youngest legal prodigy in the country." Meanwhile, Mr. Davis threw his hands up. "This is outrageous. We're letting a child grandstand in court." Judge Thompson's gaze snapped to him. "Enough. I've heard more reason from this child than from you today." Elijah turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, I believe we've proven my mom paid her rent. Mr. Martin's motive was greed, not truth. He tried to cheat us." The judge nodded slowly. "And that will weigh heavily in my decision." Keisha could no longer hold back her emotions. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at Elijah, her little boy standing so bravely in front of everyone. The courtroom blurred for her, but his voice was sharp and steady. "Elijah," she whispered softly, "you've done more than I ever dreamed." The judge noticed her tears and spoke gently. "Mrs. Brown, your son's courage is extraordinary. Few children could carry such responsibility." Elijah glanced back at his mom, smiling faintly. "I told you, Mom, we're not alone. The truth is on our side." Mr. Martin shifted uncomfortably, now the focus of angry glares from the gallery. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, capturing every detail. Mr. Davis tried one last time. "Your Honor, this case has turned into a spectacle. We cannot rely on a child's testimony to destroy my client's reputation." But Judge Thompson's voice was firm. "No, Mr. Davis. What has destroyed your client's reputation is his own greed, and the evidence brought forward. The boy has only shined a light on it." Keisha covered her face, overwhelmed with gratitude. She had walked into court expecting defeat, but was now watching her son dismantle injustice with wisdom beyond his years. Judge Thompson tapped his gavel lightly. the sound echoing in the silent courtroom. At this point, the evidence overwhelmingly supports Mrs. Brown's defense. The receipts, the bank records, and Mr. Martin's own admission make his claim untenable. Mr. Davis paled, his voice cracking. "Your Honor, surely we can—" The judge cut him off. "No, Mr. Davis, this court does not reward deceit. Your client has not only wasted this court's time, but has attempted to evict a tenant under false pretenses." The gallery erupted with murmurs of approval. People looked at Elijah with admiration, some even clapping quietly before being hushed by the bailiff. Elijah took a small breath, gripping his folder tightly. "So, does this mean my mom is safe, Your Honor?" The judge's stern face softened. "Yes, Elijah. From what I've seen today, your mother has nothing to fear. You've defended her with remarkable skill." Keisha let out a sob of relief, burying her face in her hands. Elijah reached for her, hugging her tightly. Mr. Martin, defeated, slumped in his seat, unable to meet anyone's eyes. His greed had been exposed, and an 8-year-old had been the one to bring him down. The courtroom waited as Judge Thompson gathered his papers. The tension was thick, every eye on the bench. Elijah held his mother's hand tightly, his little heart pounding. "Before I deliver my ruling," the judge began, "I want to acknowledge something rare. This court has witnessed truth defended not by a lawyer, but by a child with courage, discipline, and love for his mother." He paused, scanning the room. "That is something the law was built to protect." Reporters scribbled madly, capturing every word. Cameras flashed. The gallery, filled with neighbors and strangers alike, leaned forward eagerly. Elijah glanced at his mom and whispered, "We're almost there." Keisha nodded, tears still glistening. "Because of you, baby," Mr. Davis tried to salvage what little dignity he had left. "Your Honor, this cannot be precedent. We can't encourage children to act as attorneys." Judge Thompson gave him a sharp look. "We don't need precedent to see justice. Today, this boy didn't replace the law. He reminded us of its purpose." He lifted his gavel, the room holding its breath. "Therefore, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Keisha Brown. All claims against her are dismissed." The gavel struck. Cheers erupted instantly. The sound of the gavel echoed, but it was drowned almost instantly by applause and cheers from the gallery. Strangers stood to their feet, clapping for Elijah, the little boy who had defended his mother and won. Keisha hugged her son tightly, sobbing into his shoulder. "You saved us, Elijah. You really did." Elijah, still holding his folder, whispered back, "I just told the truth, Mom. That's all." Judge Thompson, smiling faintly now, let the applause continue for a moment before calling for order. "This court is adjourned. And young man," he said, turning to Elijah, "you should be very proud of yourself. You've reminded us all of what justice looks like." Reporters rushed forward as soon as the judge left the bench. Elijah, how did you learn all this?" one asked. Cameras flashed as microphones were shoved near his face. Elijah blinked shyly, his voice soft but steady. "I read books, I listened, and I love my mom. That's why I had to do it." The gallery erupted again, people whispering about his brilliance. Some even said, "That boy will be a lawyer one day." Keisha kissed the top of his head. "No, he's already more than that. He's my hero." Outside the courthouse, the crowd followed Elijah and his mother down the steps. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and people clapped as though they had just witnessed history. Keisha held Elijah's hand tightly, guiding him through the chaos. "Baby, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Elijah smiled up at her. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. You've always fought for me. Today it was my turn." One reporter called out, "Elijah, do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up?" The boy tilted his head thoughtfully. "Maybe, but mostly I just want to help people who don't have anyone else to stand up for them." The crowd cheered again, touched by his words. Judge Thompson, exiting quietly from the side door, stopped for a moment to watch. He smiled, murmuring to himself, "That boy is going to change the world." As the sun set behind the courthouse, Keisha hugged Elijah once more. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe, free, and full of hope. Elijah, only 8 years old, had stood in the face of injustice and won. Their new beginning had just begun.